But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's be at it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I've never seen such idiots in all my life. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with money.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's be at it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 313. What is feminism really? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity Mike Stevenson. And tonight we've got kind of a mixed bag. We're probably going to finish our article on early 20th century female supremacy. We might not. It's possible that, with as conversational as we are, we might not get through the whole thing. But if we do, we've got some other things to look at, and if not, we'll start the next stuff next week. It'll be at least another week before we get back to the timeline, possibly two, because I might read you one of my articles. Just sort of as a rundown of what we're going to see in the timeline.
Wait, you're going to respond to yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna.
That's a trick I've never done. That's an idea.
We're gonna respond to the information because a lot of my articles are pretty dry. And it's because, well, actually, I don't know if I can read it because the blog's down. I'll have to look and see if there's a well, yeah, there is an archive of it. Even if there's not an archive on archive.org or archive.is, I published it on Breaking the Glasses before I published it on the HBB blog. So there you go. But before we get into all that, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions. And as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in a path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing about our social media platforms because the HBB blog is currently down, and we don't have an ETA on when it's going to be fixed. So it's not the provoked thoughts, at least not to our knowledge. It appears to be technical difficulties of the boomer kind. Like, basically, a bunch of stuff is outdated and needs to be updated and shit. So, there you go. But, in any case, we'll get on with it. So, we've been reading this article, and I, up to this point, and I point out, this woman has been highly snooty about men and quite condemning, really. But in the meantime, she talks about women like women are something particularly special in terms of capabilities and, moral superiority. The old line, men are physically stronger, women are morally superior, which women have worked really hard to debunk during the last 50 years. Not on purpose, but they still did work pretty hard to debunk that in their advocacy for things like baby killing and promiscuous sex and being able to abandon your husband and still take his money and the family property and keep his kids away from him, and lying about criminal allegations and stuff like that. Like, clearly women are not in any way morally superior to men. Every manner of corruption that women accuse men of, women are just as guilty. So there you go. And the last thing we read that this woman said, real quick before I go on, just make sure you guys are in the live stream in Discord, right?
Yes.
Okay, just double checking, because I'm going to start moving the screen up here to where we were last week. The last thing that we looked at last week was her comment: a man's brain is only half a brain, and we are the other half. The half of anything is not worth the whole. A woman has a power that a man has not, and a man has a power that a woman has not. Something that a woman actually could acknowledge back in the day. Like today, that comment would be: a woman has a power that a man has not, but there's nothing a man can do that a woman can't do.
Except oppression.
Yeah, except oppression. Yeah.
Which is a kind of power, it's all been sliced down and framed as victim and perpetrator.
Yeah.
The only power a man has is perpetrator, and the only power a woman has is being absolutely perfect in every way. Everyone's Mary Poppins now.
Yeah, everyone's there. Mary Poppins was actually kind of scary from my perspective as a kid. Like, she just came in and took over the entire household, undermined the parents, took the kids to really weird places, could fly, had a magic bag. She could have pulled anything out of it. Like, that lady was weird.
Yeah, she was a witch. She was a straight up witch. It's just like Bedknobs and Broomsticks. They're basically the same movie.
Yeah.
With the same guy playing the father, weirdly enough.
Well, you know. He was probably the most fun part of that whole movie, too. I mean, I liked all of the acting in it. Obviously, like, Dick Van Dyke always shines as well. But the father in that movie, and same thing with Bedknobs and Broomsticks. There's just a particular... Sometimes the guy that plays the straight man is the best part of the whole movie. I don't know, just me. Like,
the dude had an arc. That was the point.
Yeah.
Even back in those days, like, Mary Poppins didn't have an arc. She was perfect at the beginning and perfect at the end. The same with Angela Lansbury's character. It's not just a modern phenomenon, folks. There have always been these vapid Mary Sues that are just always perfect.
Yeah. Well, and if you give a woman an arc, you piss women off. You think about it. Like, men have always had that, and it's always made great characters, right? They've always been great characters because they have that arc. They have that, they start out with major flaws and they learn to overcome them, or they learn to improve themselves. Every time you try to do that with a female character, it's treated like it's misogyny. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I sent us on a tangent so early in the show. Let's get on with it.
It was a good tangent, though. But yeah, so this whole thing, looking at that one paragraph, kind of, when we ended on that, and I went away and I thought about it, and I came back, feminists back in the day at least had to acknowledge that men and women relied on each other, and men and women were better off working together than in opposition to each other, right? But they still demonized men. They still treated men like the bad guys, instead of saying our situation has changed because of the Industrial Revolution, and there are things that are safe for women to do now that maybe weren't before, and there are things that are not so hard for women to do now, and we can help with things that men were doing before without women. And, that would have been a better pathway for feminism to take. It would have been a legitimate movement if it was just about balancing things out after the Industrial Revolution changed how much need there was for a heavy division of labor between men and women. But they couldn't do that. They acknowledge that they need men's strength, they acknowledge that they need men's support, and then they turn around and say, but men are the bad guys. You're the villains in the story, and we're the main characters. That's their whole line. So then she follows this up where she started to sound based. She started to sound good when she started to say, the blending of the two will make a better whole. Then she says, men have begun to fear women because they are surpassing them in so many lines of endeavor. She didn't actually come out and prove this. She talks about colleges, but she certainly didn't talk about coal mines, right? And I just saw a woman on Twitter talking about job statistics. And she looked at early 20th century women and today's women. And aside from switching from farm labor to HR work, women are pretty much doing the same 20 jobs that they did in the beginning of the 20th century. That's the big change that we've had, is that women have gone from doing a very productive thing to doing something that's predatory. But yeah, when men have begun to fear women because they are surpassing them in so many lines of endeavor. Recently, men have even considered barring women out of coeducational colleges. Why? because women are carrying away the scholarship records, and men cannot stand to have their inferiority proclaimed. In education, women have made tremendous strides. It is not so long since women freed themselves from their man-made belief that it was unwomanly for a woman to have an idea of her own. I don't think a man ever told me that.
Never heard that before in my life. You know, who was telling her that?
Yeah.
The answer is she's telling herself that, right? Men are not saying that. Oh, God. Anyway.
No, in fact, most of the men that I've come into contact prefer women who think for themselves instead of women who need babysitters.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting what she said about education, though. What were you going to say, Mike?
It's the difference between when women come to men with their problems and when men come to women with their problems. As we've started to discover over the years, for the most part, when women come to men with their problems, they don't want him to have an idea of his own. They just want him to say, yeah, you're absolutely right, my dear. She's totally in the wrong. Yeah, I'm here for you. I love you and stuff. Whereas when a man comes to a woman with a problem, he wants her to help him solve it. He actually wants her to come up with an idea of her own that perhaps he hadn't thought of. Because that's, men actually try to solve problems, I guess, because if it's come to the point where he's asking someone else for help with his problem, it means he's at an impasse, because normally they try to solve problems on their own. So if he ever does ask for help, it's because it's such a complex problem that he does need help with it. And I guess I was about to say, I guess men have more complex problems or more problems. I guess it's simplifying a little bit. I guess it is modern women who tend to have problems that aren't really problems. That just everyday neurotic frustrations. And again, hashtag not all. But you get what I'm saying.
There's a couple of things going on there. Like, first off, girls grow up being indulged when it comes to seeing things as problems, right? Like, you have the sibling fights where you're in the back seat of the car and the parents are in the front, and your sibling's foot is on your side of the floor, right? Most of the time, like when I was a kid, my parents didn't put up with that crap. There was none of that. You just basically were told, get over it, deal with it, whatever. And if somebody was deliberately taking advantage of that, that would have been a different story. But those kind of petty complaints were treated like petty complaints regardless of which one of us did it. But I noticed that when I was with friends and family, a lot of times how petty the complaint was recognized as depended on the sex of the kid. And it was recognized as petty when boys had that complaint. But when girls had that complaint, they got indulged. And it was that way with a lot of different things. And it changed the way, like, I look at the difference between how I react to a lot of stuff. And I still react like a girl to some things. But I don't when somebody's mocking me. Because I learned how to turn it around a lot of the times. And my example that I usually give for that was, the younger sibling likes to do the mimicking what the older sibling is saying. So you say something, and then the younger sibling repeats it in a funny voice, and it gets annoying over time. And so I, complained about it, and Mom and Dad were like, well, he's not doing anything to hurt you, just deal with it, And, of course, it was in front of friends and everything. So finally I decided I was going to put a stop to it, because I got more and more annoyed. So I started rapid fire, just saying a bunch of things, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and He's rapid fire repeating everything I say verbatim in the high-pitched voice. Took a lot of talent, actually. Looking back, I've got to respect the skill level there. But he was doing it so fast that he lost track of actually thinking about the words. And that's when I said, I'm a girl and I wear pink panties. That ended it right there. No more repetition. And
I love that word.
the older sibling always wins. Not true, though, because the younger sibling was bigger than me by the time I was in kindergarten.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I got his. I was wearing his hand-me-downs by the time I was in the 2nd grade. When I needed play clothes. Like, wear dresses to school, wear my brother's old pants to go to the park, because I'm gonna get grass stains, right? But yeah, you grow up, you learn that stuff when you have good parents. But a lot of girls treat every little thing as harassment.
Mm-hmm.
He's breathing too loudly. I'm sorry, I've got a nose whistle, but I have allergies. Well, blow your nose. Not deal with it. People breathe. Deal with it. And so that's part of it, right? Girls treat things as problems that guys don't treat as problems, because guys don't get any sympathy for petty complaints when they're growing up. And for some reason, people indulge girls' petty complaints even when it's annoying to hear them complain all the time. I think that's partly why in 1st and 2nd grade, basically around the ages of like 5, 6, 7 years old, the girls are all major tattletales. And it's, when I say tattletale, I don't mean, somebody hits them and then they go tell the teacher. I mean, somebody's tapping their foot on the floor and they go tell the teacher. Like, who cares if somebody's tapping their foot on the floor? People fidget, right? But it's noise, so you're not supposed to be making noise in class. Therefore, there's a rule against it, and you go tell the teacher. That's one. The other one is girls really are kind of addicted to that indulgence. And nobody opposes that in them as they're growing up. Right? The victimhood and the need to have that sense of righteous indignation and so on. So they want validation instead of solutions, because they need that. I guess it's like a video game achievement. Yes, I am in the right. I am the victim. I win. But the problem's still there, and it doesn't get better. Like, I don't know. I have been... I've faced the opposite of that when there have been problems that I've suggested solutions for or asked for solutions for, because I'm not demanding that validation. I'm saying, hey, this is a problem. This is the cause of the problem. This is the result. This is the effect of the problem. And this is the only thing I can think of for a solution. Do you have any better ideas? Suddenly it's, well, your complaint's not legitimate because even when it's something like, this is interfering with my ability to do my tasks at work. Or this is a health threat. This is a safety threat. This is a fire hazard. I got that over... when I worked at the gas station, we had a little not supply closet, but a little water... I don't want to say water closet. It's not a bathroom. But it was a utility closet that had a drain in the bottom, and it was like a giant 4-foot-tall sink. And above this giant 4-foot-tall sink was the water heater, which was also about 4 feet tall. And somebody had removed the little door between the little wall around it and the pilot light. And so the pilot light was just exposed. You could see it, which in and of itself wasn't a problem because there was like 4 inches in between that and the edge of the water heater, and then there's another 4 inches to the wall around the water heater, and that wall was aluminum. and it wasn't getting warm, so it wasn't a big deal. But then my boss started storing paperwork in there, in that space. And I kept explaining the problem and everything, and she kept accusing me of hysteria. Finally, for other reasons, OSHA came by surprise and visited the store. And they went ballistic over that. Storing paperwork next to an open flame that is in a gas line at a gas station. Natural gas versus fuel, but still.
That is just absolutely ridiculous that anybody thought that that was okay to do. I mean, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked in the same kind of industry with a lot of gases and a lot of paperwork, and you don't just leave open like combustible things near combustible sources of fucking energy. Oh my God, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
I would have went ballistic too if I worked for OSHA. Holy shit.
And the reason why my complaint about it was viewed as legitimate, the stated reason, was because I already had a solution in mind when I went to her with the complaint. Therefore, I must have come up with the solution to try to be, to look good or be controlling or whatever, and then made up the complaint in order to force it on her.
Oh my God.
Yeah. If I just said, oh, I'm scared. This is really, I feel unsafe, and shook a little bit and maybe dropped a tear or two, that might have made all the difference in the world. Yeah,
it's like that meme of, I'm mad, here's a solution. I don't want a solution, I want to be mad.
Yeah.
Scared instead of mad.
Yeah, I don't
Women
like
in a nutshell,
scared.
am I right, fellas?
I will do that with being mad, though. Even after I get a solution. Okay, here's a solution. All right, I'm going to solve the problem, but damn it, I'm still mad. This is a good mad. I'm not letting it go. I might be mad for a few hours after this. Thank you, but I'm still mad. But I'm not mad at you. Like, it's just the tism fighting the femininity. Very, very weird. NovaFan21 gave us $1 and said, given how feminists use buzzwords with an assumed context that is often omitted, I'm guessing a woman with a mind or an opinion meant some extreme lesbian separatist attitude such as pro-abortion. Well, they treat all criticism of women's choices or ideas or suggestions or Michael Blake is asking when we're going to be live. We are live. Right. The stream is running.
Yeah, where are you?
You're having technical difficulties, my man. Once it's not us.
Why won't it let me reply to him? What the heck? Did YouTube drop? I'm going to be mad because it was working.
No, it's right here. It's definitely running.
For fuck's sake. What the hell? Everything's got to be a mess. Like, nothing can just be straightforward, I swear. This drives me nuts. Sorry. It just hit me that I had that comment. I'm like, I don't understand why... why we're being asked. But then at the same time, I see the comment is not in the YouTube stream. Oh, that's okay. This my brain is putting the icons in the wrong place when I'm looking at the restream chat. That's X. So we're not streaming to X. So I'm going to double check.
It was us having technical difficulties. Dang it.
Yeah, it looks like we're supposed to be streaming to X. I'm going to look here.
I don't think I'm ever going to get used to calling it X.
I know, it sounds like a porn site.
Yeah. I mean, geez, it practically is.
Well, I
Totally
mean, there's this one feminist that is replying to a bunch of my stuff that every time she replies to me, porn bots keep liking her comments. I finally commented, gee, the porn bots really seem to like your comments. She hasn't answered me on that note, but yeah, it looks like it's going. It's live. It has 162 views. Apparently no comments, but I can see the image. It's the one that's on screen right now. I can see the comments. So I don't know what's going on there.
Do we have any porn bots yet? You know you're live when you get nudes in bio.
Nudes in bio.
You know you've made it big when you get nudes in bio.
There we go. No, but we'll move on to the next. Telumnar gave us $20 in a super chow. Said the actor who plays the father in Mary Poppins is David Tomlinson, or David Cecil McAllister Tomlinson to his friends. I could not remember his name. That's really bad. And I wonder, women with ideas, does she mean can evaluate things from her own opinions or regurgitates what she has been told by university re-feminist buzzwords? She does not seem to be talking about women listening to men's emotional difficulties, that's for sure. Yeah, no, feminism from the beginning treated men's responses to things, men's emotional difficulties, men's interests, wishes, objections, everything as illegitimate at best, petty and so on, and an attack on women at worst. So there you go. And that's all we get from feminists. We don't get feminism treating anything that men do as legitimate. At the most concession men ever get is that they'll claim that society treats men that way. But by society, we're talking about women. But they'll blame it on men. So, there you go. In the meantime, she says, men have even considered barring women out of coeducational colleges because women are carrying away the scholarship records. In other words, men have considered banning women from school because women are getting better grades. The truth is that back in the day, you had, and it's not so much men that wanted women out, it was the universities. So a woman would go to university, let's say both a man and a woman go to the same university, and they both learn the same 7 different languages, right? And he becomes a professional translator and helps diplomats in other countries and does all kinds of stuff. And, when people want to know where he went to school and he's going to tell them, they're like, oh, this great translator that does all this great work for people went to this university. If I want to become a professional translator, this might be where I should go. She goes home and she has bragging rights that she speaks 7 different languages. And now is that. She didn't have to earn a living. And, maybe a man and a woman go to the same university and they go through the same coursework and he becomes a medical doctor. Maybe she doesn't even take the test. Maybe she doesn't even, take the medical boards or get any kind of certification. Later on, when the university is seeking donations, he has money to donate. Maybe her husband has money to donate, but he doesn't really have a reason. And she doesn't, because she didn't go on to become a doctor and she didn't earn the money. Although back then doctors they weren't wealthy, because they didn't have insurance to pay them and they didn't have the high fees that they have today. Actually, insurance was created by doctors because they weren't getting paid. very often. Like, a lot of times people just didn't have the money to pay them. They'd go see the doctor, and then they might take months to pay, or they might pay with a pig or produce instead of money, and so on. And doctors wanted there to be a different way to handle that, and so they created Blue Cross. If I remember right, Blue Cross was the one. I might have to do a show on that at some point, because it was a profession, basically, that was dominated by men, where people did expect them to kind of work for free, or work on money that was going to come much later, right? Work on credit, instead of getting paid when they did their work. And you really can't do that consistently with that many people and survive. So she says, once a woman has obtained her independence and come to value her self-respect, she will demand the recognition of her complete equality, politically, socially, and in the laboring world. So women have to obtain their independence. Men just are born with it. And there's a lot to unpack there. We're going to start out by the fact that nobody takes responsibility for men, but everybody takes responsibility for women. You might consider the reason that women have to obtain their independence is because women are, by nature, dependent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're all born as, well, I was about to say we're all born as individuals, but we're not. We're very much born dependent of all the species out there. We are among the most helpless at the moment of birth, and for the many, many years after birth, all kinds of mammals that are sort of able to walk almost straight out of the womb. Human beings, not so much. We are the extreme end of the K reproductive strategy. So we all have to earn our independence, and it takes us a bloody long time. But men are very much more obliged to earn it. They're expected to earn it. 100 years ago, they're expected to earn it by the age of something like 12, right?
Yeah, they had to. They didn't just have to earn it; they had to learn it, right? You had to develop knowledge and skill in order to be independent. Just like you learn to crawl, and then you learn to walk, and then you learn to run, and you learn to do any other types of physically demanding activity or physically challenging activity, like that takes balance and coordination. You learn all of that through trial and error, falling down, busting your ass, busting your head, sometimes in the same tumble. And
you mean like this kid upstairs is currently doing right now? Oh my God! Sorry, it's just so distracting. I don't know if anybody can hear it, but God damn, I think he's gonna come through the ceiling.
Are you sure that's a kid and not a dog?
No, it's the kid.
Okay. But yeah, girls get shielded from all of that, and boys don't get sympathy when they get hurt, like girls do. So boys learn their independence. Girls don't. Girls go running to somebody to kiss it and make it better when they get injured. Girls go running to somebody to fix the problem when they can't complete a thing that they're trying to complete, or do a thing that they're trying to do. And a lot of times it's sort of imposed on them. If a girl is having difficulty with something and she's getting frustrated and she's having difficulty moderating her frustration in the moment, and maybe starts whimpering or crying or making angry noises, or that kind of thing, parents have a habit of taking the thing away and doing it for the kid. And you see this with girls. Boys will try the same thing over and over again until they figure out how to get it to work, or they figure out that it's impossible. And sometimes it takes injury for them to figure out that it's impossible. One of my friends as a kid broke his leg. I think the second or third time he tried using a bedsheet as a parachute before he figured out. It looked like it was going to work. Getting it damp did not fix the problem. It still leaked.
Holy shit.
So yeah, we had all kinds of stuff like that. We had a kid in the neighborhood that broke his leg playing football too. So two actually, one in high school, one in elementary school. We played hard. But the bottom line is, like, this idea about women obtaining their independence, that you have to wrestle it away from men, and where men actually would like for women to maybe carry a little more of their own weight, and make it so that it's not so big of a responsibility on men.
Burdensome, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, maybe pay a little of your own way. Maybe don't fund a misandric, man-hating movement with your husband's money in your husband's name, where you put Mrs. Husband's name as your name when you're writing articles about how terrible men are.
Right.
Then she goes on and she's going to attack the church. The church has been very, very hard on women. It has done its best to keep us in subjugation and to restrict us mentally. Women have, at least in Protestant churches, I don't know if it's like this in Catholic churches, but women have controlled the Protestant church for decades, maybe longer. As soon as it became a thing that the clergy didn't control the church, that the Bible was available to parishioners, that the dogma and the participation in the actual spiritual tasks within the church were part of the activities of the parishioners. Women took over. Women started organizing everything. You'd still have the preacher in the pulpit doing the sermon and the schedule of sermon and evening services and things like that. That was probably set by the clergy in every church. But all of the social activities, all of the dinners, all of the entertainment, like when you're going to have a cantata, when you're going to have a play, when you're going to have anything to do with spiritual entertainment, any kind of education of the youth in the church, all of that was controlled by women. I've never attended a church where that was not the case. Not regularly anyway. I've only been to Catholic church a few times, and not being Catholic, I don't always understand what's going on in there. Jen Bottle says not in the Catholic, but it's changing a lot and not for the better, and that doesn't surprise me. Mostly men's clubs did the Catholic social services. Okay, that's actually good. That probably was more effective, at least. Yeah, and then Packard says the Catholic Church was 10 times as bad with the co-worship of the Virgin Mary. There is that. That's very gynocentric. Like, the Protestant Church did not treat Mary like a deity or a holy person. She was simply a woman who made a spiritual decision.
And on the subject of, she talks about being restricted mentally, and the adverb is almost irrelevant there. There's a lot to be said for restriction, especially when you compare it with unrestriction. I mean, do I really need to explain how being completely unrestricted is not necessarily a virtue? It leads to all manner of uncontrollable chasing of pointless whims and stuff. Leads to promiscuity, which can topple empires. It has in the past, and it seems to be doing it presently. Home Math did a very good video about that very recent, like 2 hours ago. I watched it just before we came on. Home Math is smashing it. Fucking everyone go subscribe to Home Math.
Yeah.
And restriction is very good for one's development, because it gives you a pathway. If you have to work within a brief, it's a lot easier to work. That's why to this day, when I do music, I do cover versions, because it gives me a narrow path to work down. I need to do these chords, I need to do these changes, I need to work within those restrictions, and from that, I can just forge right ahead with the idea, and it's done with relative ease, and I can still be creative within those boundaries. And it's the same with my videos, because they're mostly response videos. I find something I want to respond to, and I stay within the boundaries of that, and I find that much easier than actually writing an entirely original song from scratch, because I have all the possibilities in the world, and I don't know what to pick, where to go from, because whatever I come up with, I'm like, no, that's not good enough, and it from there, it's just nothing I can ever think of is good. It's much like having too many television channels. Back in the day, we only had like 4 or 5 or something. So you would just flick between the 4 or 5 channels, and you'd find the thing that was the best, and you just like, oh, well, what's this now? When you got thousands of channels, you just flick through them constantly, because like, however interesting this thing is, there's another 1,000 of these. I'm going to keep flicking through until I find something I want, and you never find the thing you want, because you know there's thousands more things that you could choose from. That's what I mean by a total lack of restriction can lead to you never finding a path. And obviously too much restriction could be a bad thing. If you've only got one channel, then you're gonna get constantly brainwashed by that one channel.
Yeah.
But we have thousands of channels, and we still find ourselves getting brainwashed by the television, because it's all regulated by the fucking government. But speaking of restriction as though it's a universally uncontroversially bad thing is not the case. I mean, it starts in infancy. Babies prefer to be restricted. If you wrap them up tight in
swaddling.
Yeah, they're actually a lot more comfortable than they are if their limbs are just flying loose everywhere. They start crying if they're completely unrestricted. If you tuck someone up tightly in bed, they feel better. Obviously, this changes as you grow older, and eventually you want fewer restrictions. But you get that way by learning the narrow path of reasonable restrictions. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
It's interesting. The word restriction is, I think she is somewhat misusing the word restriction. Attention deficit disorder is a failure in regulation. So, a person with ADD, like right now, I have 3 apps open on the laptop and 2 apps open on the desktop computer. I have a big TV-sized monitor. It's actually a TV with 4 tabs on the desktop. In the laptop, I have a bunch of tabs, but two windows. One I can see and you can't, and then the other one that everyone can see in my screen there. And I'm running all this stuff, and the regulation part of it is my being able to focus on the tab in the window where I'm reading to you guys versus everything else, and then glance over periodically to check the chat or check for super chows or check the restream to make sure things are going the way they're supposed to be going and stuff like that. Right? But if I had ADHD, all of that would overwhelm me because I wouldn't be able to tune the stuff on the screen, the desktop screen, out to look at the laptop. And depending on how bad it was, it might just be challenging to tune other things out, or if it was really severe, it would just be impossible. And I've seen this with people that I've worked with in various ways. And they have that failure in regulation, right? Women in general have a lower level of regulation of their thoughts and their attention and taking things to extremes and stuff like that than men do. And a lot of feminists will object to that. But men can focus for decades on building projects and get them done. And women do have a habit of collecting projects that they never finish. Right? Men can focus for generations on making change in society and developing things in society that benefit other people. And women get distracted by every little problem in the middle of dealing with bigger problems. And it's not entirely gendered, because some women, and I think this is one of the things that gets us diagnosed as autistic, some women are more internally regulated than other women, more logic focused, more able to tune things out and focus exclusively on one thing when it's necessary. And some men don't have that capability. And they're more likely to get an ADHD diagnosis when that happens. But when she's talking about the church wants you to regulate your attention onto subjects that are beneficial to your life and beneficial to your spirituality, your relationship with deity, right? That's what church is about. So when women want to focus on things that are not about that, the church doesn't necessarily tolerate that. And this woman gets mad. And she says things like, women are beginning to feel very bitter toward the church or the men who control it. Yeah, because they won't let you sleep around and divorce your husband and still feel good about yourself. Right? That's dysregulation. That's you not focusing on your marriage, not focusing on your relationship, not focusing on your spirituality, and instead focusing on your feelings and letting them get out of control. Women are really bad in particular about emotional dysregulation. Women flip-flop emotionally on a frequency level that sometimes just drives men up the wall.
It's scary. It's scary how women can just have a mood change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary when it happens to the woman too. Like, one minute you're fine, and the next minute you're like ready to cry because you thought of something. Your whole internal monologue. Nobody knows why you're ready to cry, but there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it is scary, but that's not what she's on about there. I think is she wants the rules of the church to not apply when she wants to misbehave. And we are talking about a woman who was married to a wealthy man, divorced him, and married another wealthy man. She says, they haven't driven us away from the Christian religion. They can't do that. But by their dictatorial discrimination, they are driving us out of the churches as they are organized, out of the edifices. which
Narrator's voice, they did drive them out of the Christian religion.
Yeah.
And into the arms of the Rainbow One.
You know, I don't think that was men's fault. I don't think that was the church's fault. I think that was women refusing to, like, you show up at church for the social reasons instead of showing up for the spiritual reasons. It was women refusing to actually go to church to worship. I don't know. I grew up in a small. The church was built by farmers because there wasn't one nearby, and it was an offshoot of the Baptist church over the argument of whether you're saved or not before you get baptized, which to me that's kind of a petty argument, but I don't have anything to do with that. But in any case, where I went to church, there was a pattern of how people behave toward each other, and how people tried to live their lives, and how people faced their difficulties and their temptations and all that stuff. And it was pretty down to earth. It was just, well, these are the pitfalls in society, and here's how we're going to deal with the pitfalls. And the men and the women both did that together, right? But I noticed going around doing wedding photography and visiting churches in different communities when I moved to different communities and stuff, that was actually uncommon. A lot of churches, when the women are there, it's the whole reason that they're at church is to socialize with people that they meet in church and to gossip about each other. Like that's the, like, oh, and they're doing a little religion on the side. That's the whole thing. And so I think that's probably partly what she was responding to, was that women, a lot of times, their participation in this spiritual endeavor isn't about the spirituality. And when the endeavor itself stubbornly continues to be spiritual and about the spirituality, women are offended. If that makes sense. Like, sort of trying to say it without being preachy to... I know a lot of our listeners are of different faiths, and I don't know if that happens in every faith, but it definitely happens in the Protestant church. Any case, she says, if man wants to make a little god of himself, he will have to do it by himself and for himself. Can I get your terms are acceptable?
Yeah, right?
He may stand in the pulpit and sit in the pew, but we also must stand as well as sit. So what she's mad about is not being able to preach. Which she's doing right here. I don't have a platform. Nobody listens to me.
Right.
In the letter that she published in a national magazine. A national magazine.
She's arguing about being cancelled in some kind of cancel culture, but you still got a column in your newspaper.
Jeez. Yeah.
But yeah, it's 100 years later, and you ladies have still not been cancelled.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, y'all have made yourselves into goddesses for herself and by him herself. I forget which is her and him. It's all become a little bit blurred, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And none of this is a result of men turning themselves into the Godhead. It's very much women turning themselves into the Godhead. Probably in direct opposition to the Christian Godhead being a pretty explicitly male one. But I hope people are learning their lesson that there was a reason that was done. Because in the absence of a male godhead, you end up with a female one.
Yep. Yeah, the big thing that I'm seeing in changes in churches over the last, since I was a kid, is that they've gotten away from following the teachings of the Bible, and they've gotten away from teaching self-regulation and having a strong moral structure, paying attention to the impact of your actions on other people, and they've been infiltrated by the LGBTQ me activism. And it depends on where you are, how bad that is. Like, if you go into churches in a small town, a lot of times they're a lot like they were when I was a kid. But if you go into churches in bigger cities and stuff where there's a lot bigger, denser population, maybe pun intended, you get it. There's sort of this encapsulated, this is the norm in the city, and therefore you now get churches where they have LGBTQ activities in the church, and they'll even celebrate things like Pride Month and stuff like that. It's distasteful to talk about a church celebrating Pride. It's the dumbest thing. I mean, there are 7 deadly sins. 6 of them are not pride, but one of them is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it doesn't matter how you feel about like whether the religion is legitimate or not or whatever. It still doesn't belong in church. It's the antithesis of what we were taught. But yeah, that's basically the result of women taking over. Women, the same thing's been done in education. Education used to be dominated by male teachers, male administrators, and so on, male personnel, and it was about teaching students skills that would help them work in society and provide a service and earn an income and be part of their community. And any social education that took place in the school was through that filter of how can I make this person more skilled at being a functional member of their community. And women took over education and they just did a 180, and now they're doing their best to completely cripple students in terms of being skilled at being functional members of their community. Like, completely destroyed it. They don't teach life skills, they don't teach work skills, and now they're actually teaching social lessons that are detrimental to the student's future ability to be a functional member of their community.
And it can't be much of a coincidence that the people associating themselves with pride also seem to be expressing some lust, not to mention some greed, and by the looks of them, some gluttony, and obviously some sloth, and necessarily envy, quite visibly angry. Have I covered them all? Yeah, that's all 7.
Yep.
None of this is a coincidence. There's it's not even a religious reason that these 7 things are outlined. It's obvious from the evidence before our very eyes that there's a reason these things are considered undesirable states of mind, as are their complete opposites. I mean, that's one area where if you approach these things religiously, and I mean that in the proverbial sense as well as the literal sense, the opposite of any given deadly sin can also be deadly. That's why shame is just as bad as pride, and never eating anything is just as bad as gluttony,
Mm-hmm.
and never giving a shit about anything is just as bad as anger, and so on and so forth. But what we're seeing is the result of religious Gnosticism, taking the 7 deadly sins and going, no, we're going to do all of these things just because you told us not to. And I guess that's part of human nature. That's largely what drives a lot of us. Like, you fucking tell us not to talk about things, and that's just going to make us talk about those things, because don't you fucking tell me what not to talk about.
Yep.
But talking is one thing. In entire realms of lifestyle are another. There's a reason we live our lives a certain way, and it's very different from talking about things. You can talk about whatever you like, just don't eat yourself to death, or be lazy or envious or too lustful. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Don't develop main character syndrome. Every single one of the other 6 is dependent on. When we say pride is the modern iteration. Vanity is the correct iteration, I guess, the correct way of saying it. Vanity is different from, when we use the word pride, we often use the word pride to describe things that are much milder than vanity, like satisfaction in a job well done. I think I described that the other day in terms of how I feel when I finish scrubbing a toilet. Like, I don't need to show it off to anybody. I don't want a trophy, but I'm very satisfied with how it's turned out, right? Pride would be, when you say you take pride in a job well done, it's not vanity. I did this. This is about me. This is the way it should be, and now it's in order. That's satisfaction pride. Vanity pride is, I'm the main character. I'm important. Everybody needs to know how hard I worked on this damn toilet, and nobody is allowed to use it because it has to stay clean now, right? Vanity is self-destructive, and every one of the other ones are as well. And in the process of being destructive, people often hurt others along with themselves. And I guess that's why we refer to them as the 7 deadly sins. People die for these things, and they kill for these things because they're focused on themselves. They're basically engaging in main character syndrome. So yeah, it's not so much a matter of you have to be religious to understand this, as it is, you have to have at least a little bit of humility. Humility and shame are not the same, by the way. And you just have to be able to recognize the importance of other people. That's humility, is recognizing the importance of other people, without having to think about your own importance in comparison to theirs. It just matters that other people are important.
There's a middle way. For every deadly sin, there's an equal and opposite deadly sin, and it stands to reason between the two of them there is a middle way. That's kind of what Buddhism was about. It's specifically the middle way. In that case, between hedonism and asceticism, between pursuing pleasure and pursuing pain. Because that was something that the Hindu faith found itself going in all sorts of very strange directions. So there were people that would indulge in all kinds of pleasure because they thought it made them godly, and in all kinds of pain because it made them godly. So, similar things happened with the ancient Greeks at similar times. And the whole idea of Buddhism is it's the middle way. Like, there's no salvation through these extremes. You need to find somewhere in the middle. And even that's not the answer, because that's going to lead you to the both sides syndrome and all kinds of places. So yeah, you'll never find the absolute answer to everything, because anything can be corrupted. You just got to keep your wits about you, folks.
Yep. She goes on sex discrimination must be done away with in the church as well as in politics, in the professions, and in the businesses and laboring worlds. Men say all priests must be men. We might retort that all priests shall be women. But we do not. We say the priesthood shall be filled by those best fitted to occupy the pulpit, whether men or women. Well, it's been 100 years. We see the result of that. Who decides who's best suited? She goes on, I say if you are worthy to be a priest, be a priest. But if I am worthy to be a priest, I shall be a priest too. We will both be priests. This is not working against man, but merely standing shoulder to shoulder with him. So that was her statement on gender roles in the church. And if you notice, like I said before, with the increase in women taking positions of authority and responsibility in the church outside of the traditional female roles in the church, you got infected with pride.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and isn't this completely against like the way the church is supposed to go? First it's God, then man, then woman, right? Like the woman submits to the man submits to God. So, trying to be shoulder to shoulder with the men, that's not, it's not gonna work, lady. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's there are ways that you can be shoulder to shoulder with men and help them, but accusing them of discrimination for doing the responsibilities that they deal with and building the structures that they've built and running those structures for hundreds of years until you suddenly have free time because they also invented a lot of stuff that made your work easier. No, that's oppressive and discriminatory, right? They're the bad guys. Like, that's definitely not standing shoulder to shoulder with men. Right? That's crawling up their ass. It's not the same. Yeah, I'm looking at the chat right now. Jen Bottle, there was a comment. I don't see it. I had to look back to see what he was talking about. Yeah, it was the if you are worthy to be a priest, be a priest. Good advice, Ms. Belmont. Start your own catacomb gathering. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't think that opening up the clergy to women and catering to women's sensibilities regarding divine education, divinity school and so on, had good results. I don't think it was beneficial to the church. Don't think it was beneficial to women, and I don't think it was beneficial to the parishioners. So I'm just gonna say that, like, and you can call me sexist. You can say whatever you want about it, but look at the results. She says, unless the men of the church realize definitely our claims, we shall have to have our own priesthood. Women did that already. It was called witchcraft. Only the other day I read the decision of a convention of churches to exclude women from all positions of power and authority. They were not even allowed as members of the vestry. That is rather astonishing in the 20th century. So apparently we've had it wrong for a long time, guys. The current year was not 2015. It was 1922.
Every year is the currentest year.
Yeah. It's the current year. It's time to do this thing that we have never done before. For reasons. We live in a man-made world and worship in a man-dominated church, and we can no longer be expected to endure it. She just like goes on and on about the church, which is funny because this was published in the United States. The church isn't the government, doesn't run the government, doesn't control the government, and doesn't determine who goes into government. So I just am not buying this at all.
Do we need a long-ass lesson about the French Revolution?
We might.
There were three different factions of government that led to the French Revolution. It was royalty, the clergy, and it was the plebs. And the reason the problems came about is because the royalty and the clergy always agreed on everything, and the plebs did not. And it was this holy trinity that led the plebs to sort of go, hang on, this seems to be a rigged game.
Yeah.
A sentiment that's been much reflected in the modern day. And when you add the clergy into what would otherwise be a two-tiered class system, it rigged the game. And this is why religion and state should always be separate. This was largely one of the cornerstones of the American Republic. They did it the right way. The French Republic did it completely the wrong way because they never had state and religion separated in the first place. And arguably, the French Revolution was the tiny domino that led to the massive dominoes falling that we're currently seeing. So, yeah, to some degree, yes, the church is not the state, and it shouldn't be. But if they are allowed to interfere with each other at all, then you get nightmarish shit like the French Revolution.
Yep. But for some reason, this is a big deal for her. Of course, early in the 20th century, you did have... It dominated the culture. The church dominated the culture in the United States. It didn't dominate the government necessarily, but because it did dominate the culture, and the culture sort of determines how the government operates, because we live in a representative republic, which, the culture determines who people are going to vote for and so on. Then there's a connection, right? So she's probably looking at it as a structure of power. But even in the early 20th century, you had atheists, and they had jobs, and they did their thing. You had people who were from a variety of different churches, right? And you had people who were of non-Christian religions in the United States. And they did their thing. And they weren't punished for it or kept out of society, other aspects of society for it. They also didn't see fit to shove it up everybody's noses either. So, there you go. But, yeah, she has decided that it's very important. And, of course, she's... This magazine, the Ladies' Home Journal, was... kind of a conservative women's magazine. It was actually published until sometime 2014, when it wasn't a monthly anymore at that point, but it had special issues come out till that point. So it's only been out of publication for 10 years. So it was a really long running magazine. And so that's probably why she's going on and on about the church, trying to persuade the women who read this magazine that the church as a structure of power is bad. And I think the magazine went downhill over time. I don't remember being excited about it when I was young enough that I actually bought magazines and read them. But in any case, It's probably because my favorite magazine back in the day was Shutterbug. So, but she goes on about this. We live in a man-made world and worship in a man-dominated church, and we can no longer be expected to endure it. When you think of the beauty of the Christian faith, which means so tremendously much to people who understand it, and see that even with it as an inspiration, men have found no better way of setting questions than simply to invent the worst possible type of machinery to destroy property, kill each other, uproot everything. Settled, peaceful, and intelligent, you realize how colossal has been their failure. What claim can any man who has so failed make to an understanding of the Spirit of Christ? And then she signs it National Council of the Woman's Party, President. Again, she's talked this whole time about women standing on their own 2 feet, women standing shoulder to shoulder with men, women taking over male-dominated areas, women being independent, women thinking for themselves, and her signature is President Mrs. Oliver H.P. Belmont, New York. I don't remember what her first name is. It's somewhere in this article, or somewhere on the page where it explains who she was. But yeah, Mrs. Oliver. That's her husband's name. There are no women named Oliver that I know of. And they go on with these signatures. And then on the next page, whoops, just increase the size of the PDF here. There was some other stuff. So let's see. This was an ad from back in the day. She says, "Join the Women's Party. Work with women for women. Help win for all women. Equal control of their children." That didn't go so well. Equal control of their property. Equal control of their earnings. Equal rights in schools and universities. Equal opportunities in professions and industries. So let's start with it goes on like this, right? But equal control of their children. So did she want to give up some of that control to men in order to make it equal? Because feminist organizations have been fighting since 1840, I want to say 1843 or 1834, to take away fathers' custody rights. So, what would equality even look like if feminists fought for equal control over their children? Would it look like women getting jobs so that men could have less time at work and more time at home with their kids?
That's what it should look like. But that's not the end that they want. They want all the Gibbs without actually having to do the work, you know?
Yeah, they definitely didn't want to give up child support. Like right around this time, like child support kind of existed before this, but right around this time there was something called the Uniform Desertion Act, Uniform Desertion and something else Act. Let me see if I can find the name of it. Just by, maybe if I just type in uniform desertion, because it's such a weird name for the law, that was passed, that if a man got... No, of course Google wants to give me a bunch of articles about school uniforms. Yes, I was searching for uniform desertion, not uniform dissertation. The fuck, Google. Okay, there we go. 1910, National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws approved the Uniform Desertion and Non-Support Act, made it a criminal offense to fail to support or to desert a wife and children. Now, there were already state laws that did that. States already had their own way of handling if a man left a marriage and left the children behind. They didn't do that if a woman left the marriage and left the children behind, because the man was expected to be able to just work and provide care for the children, and he wasn't expected to need any financial support from his ex-wife. But the women, of course, didn't have to do that, and women were entitled to money if a guy left. So that was about 10 years before she had this conversation. Equal control over their children and equal control over their property.
I think control over anything should go to the person that can pay for it.
And
How about that?
who has responsibility for it, right?
Right. Exactly.
This is what she's doing would be the equivalent as this if your backseat passenger wanted equal control over the car.
Right.
You know? And when she says equal control over their property, feminists will talk about this like, you know, if you came into a marriage with with wealth, like you were from a wealthy family and you had a home or a bunch of jewelry or animals like farm animals or anything like that you brought into the marriage, your property became marital property. Now, this was true men and women, right? The husband and the wife. And women expected to benefit from their husband's economic support. When he would go to work and do his job and bring home his earnings, he was expected to spend them on the welfare of the whole family, including her, without complaint, without withholding from her, without failing to take care of her, right? But her stuff was hers. He was expected to manage it. He was responsible for it. But he wasn't allowed to abuse that privilege, and act against her interest with it. So, if, a woman married a wealthy farmer, and her father was also a wealthy farmer, and she came into that marriage with several horses, they were her horses, and she could do with them what she wanted within the limitations of his permission. And the reason that she needed his permission was because if she created expenses using those horses, he had to be able to cover that. If she created a risk to herself or other people using those horses, he was liable for that. And that was it. That was all the limitation. He couldn't take those horses and sell them without her permission and keep the money for himself and just spend it however he wanted. And if he did do that, she had legal recourse. That's the way coverture worked. But she talks about it like women didn't have any control over their property. When in actuality, women had entitlement to men's property, and they also had entitlement to their own property. Men didn't have full entitlement to either. Same thing with earnings. Equal control of their earnings. All right, if a woman had a job, a man couldn't just take the money. Her husband couldn't just take the money and spend it on himself. If she contributed it to the family, that was her choice. But she didn't have to. She wasn't responsible for supporting herself. So she goes on with equal rights in schools and universities, equal opportunities in professions and industries, and equal pay for equal work.
Oh, God. Of course that one was going to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Except women were already attending university by that time. In fact, there were women who were doctors by that time. There weren't a lot, right? But they could go. They could learn, and they could get their certification. They could go into medical practice, and some did. Many didn't. Some got degrees in nursing and went into that practice. Some didn't. Like, there's a whole bunch of different things that women did in universities and schools. Women feminists talk about this like they never happened. Same thing with professions and industries. There were things women were exempt from, and feminists talk about it like they were excluded.
Yeah.
And they pushed for some kind of Equal Rights Act, which they got in the 60s or the 70s, depending on which country you were living in. And then they pretended that never happened either.
Yeah.
And to this day, they're still pretending that it never happened. There's 70%, but you can't logic someone out of an article of faith. And their article of faith is women get paid less than men for the same job. Oh yeah? Do you have any proof? Do you even have any evidence? Shut up, you misogynist! And that's all it's ever going to be.
Mm-hmm.
What's even funnier is that there's evidence against the claim, right? There's evidence that men and women do not do the same work. It isn't the same work. It's different work. And feminists have gone down some really convoluted paths trying to justify the claim of the same work, to the degree that they will say a cashier and a manager in a grocery store are doing the same work. And no, they're not. You know, at taking on a level of responsibility for things that are not necessarily always under your control is work. Right? Being responsible for your children is work. Being responsible for your subordinates is work. Being responsible for the environment in a store where you can't be everywhere at once and you can't be there 24/7, that's work. But and it's work that's not done by the cashier. The cashier does not have to do that. If the cashier in aisle 1 does something wrong, the cashier in aisle 3 bears no responsibility, has no culpability, doesn't get called on the carpet for failing as a manager, because she's not. That's one of those things that always drives me nuts, because I've worked as a supervisor, and like the women that talk like this they get really heated about, talking like men are supervisors and women are underlings, and they're doing the same work, but men get paid more. You can be a supervisor, you just have to be willing to take on the responsibility. And able to take on the responsibility. Equal opportunities in government service, she says. So, the first woman in Congress.
Wait, in government service or government services?
Yeah, well, women got a lot of government services. But the first woman in Congress got elected before women could vote.
Wow.
In most states, or at least in the eastern states. A lot of the western states came into the Union with women's voting rights already intact. Especially the ones after the early 20th century, but even the ones before. Wyoming, for instance, there was never a time in Wyoming, I don't think, when women weren't allowed to vote, when it was a state. It was a colony when that was decided. But, yeah, equal opportunities in government service. So, she talks like women couldn't run for office after there's already been a woman in Congress. How did she get there? Equal opportunity, or equal authority and opportunity in the church. We talked a little bit about this already, but I want to point out women just sort of walk into organizations and demand inclusion in the administration of an organization that existed independently of their control for hundreds of years without providing any reason why they deserve it or why it would be beneficial to the organization. And this is just one example. Equal control of national, state, and local government. So again, what's stopping you from running for office? All you got to do is prove to people that it would be beneficial to them if you got in, and they will vote for you. Equal rights after marriage to their own identity.
What?
Yeah. Says the woman who could have signed her own name to the letter she wrote and chose to use her husband's name instead. Equal moral standard. So we've seen what has happened over the last 100 years of women mimicking what they think is the moral standard for men. And they're miserable. About 70% of women who are single mothers by choice, either because they chose not to marry when they conceived, chose to conceive without a plan to marry, or chose to divorce their husbands. And they're miserable. They're angry about their situation. They're angry about the freedom that men have from that situation. They're angry about not getting enough money from men and the government, which is taking the money from men that it gives to them. They're
really angry because we're right. You know,
Yeah.
They're right when people say that this is a hard path. It's not the way you want to go. You know, children should be raised in a two-parent household. They get pissed because they know that we're right.
Yep. And they're mad about that, and they're mad about every little, they're mad about the stigma. They're mad about how their kids, how their kids are. They're mad about the effort they have to put into it. They're mad about, all of it. But it's all self-inflicted.
Yeah. 100%.
And they still don't have an equal moral standard, because if men did that to themselves, nobody would have any sympathy for them at all.
Nope.
But women, all they have to do is complain about it a lot, publicly. Complain to the government, complain to the media, complain to each other, complain to the neighbors, complain on social media. And, people just throw money at them, right? They can get money for complaining by getting donations. They can get money for complaining by going to the government and getting laws and policy changed, right? They can get charity money, right? They can get sympathy money from men, but they'll continue to complain. So yeah, equal moral standard. If men responded to the sexual revolution the way women responded to the sexual revolution, they would be in jail. Equal moral standard. We just talked a while back, and we'll probably talk about it again in the future, about a piece of research that I got to see it because Peter Wright posted about it on X, and then I ended up purchasing the book that the research was published in, that described women's variety of things that they admitted to in a survey that was done on college students, university students. And among the different things that these students said, yes, we've done these things. One in 4 women had done something that would be called forcible rape if a man did it. That was use force or threat of force to get sex against the will of the guy that they were with, to override his refusal. 1 in 4. 1 in 5 admitted that they actually used force. 1 in 4 threat of force. And then you also had 3 in 10 admitting to having sex with an underage guy when they were overage. Like, you had a whole bunch of other things. They admitted to having sex with a guy who was intoxicated or high, having sex, actually using an intoxicant to get sex, and so on. So, like, there were a whole bunch of different ways.
And you have to wonder how much of that overlapped with the noncing. Like, how many women have drugged a minor into having sex with them? That was never. We weren't privy to that information. I mean, it's bad enough knowing that a third of women are nonces, but we don't even know how many women nonced minors that they also drugged. It's all fascinating, folks.
Yeah, in fact, like, that's by the time they were in college. Those answers were from women who were in college. So there were still women who have done these things later. This is something that people don't think about when they look at this, right? All the teachers that you read about, that have done these things to their students, they hadn't done that yet when they were in college. That happened after they graduated college and became part of the education system. Right? That's not what sex ed is supposed to be like, but that's pretty much. And the thing is, one of the things that feminists tell us when we talk about women's sexual aggression, they make this claim that usually the statistic is like 95 or 97. Occasionally I'll see them say 99% of rapists are men. And if you talk to them about it long enough, you find out they approve of legislation that defines rape to exclude forms of perpetration that women engage in, so that women don't get labeled rapists when they use force or threat of force to coerce a guy into sex that he doesn't want to have, right? 8.9% of them admitted using a weapon. Like that chick that used a machete. And then instead of getting charged with rape, she was put in a mental institution. If a guy did that, he would be charged with rape. Whether he was going to get put into a mental institution or not later, he would still be charged, tried, convicted, and punished for rape. Equal moral standard. Except when women are going to get in trouble for things that men get in trouble for. Then maybe not. So she finishes, in short, equal rights with men and all laws and customs. Notice the absence of equal
responsibilities. Yeah.
And then she finishes up, like there's a blank for the reader to sign. Let me see if I can bring this up so you can actually see the image. And they wanted you to register to be part of this organization. So why is that important? Why would it be important that in a national publication, a woman published a letter just lambasting, demonizing men, demanding things from men, but demonizing them anyway, right? And then had this this form that she wanted women to fill out to register for her organization in a society where men oppress women and women are excluded from power and are controlled by the patriarchy. Why would this form be unusual? Do you think there would have been such an organization for slaves where they might register to be part of this organization opposing their owners?
Oh.
I mean, maybe, but it could cause a civil war.
What do you think would happen if an owner got a hold of all these registrations and found the names on them and he could identify the slaves by their names? What do you think the owner would do?
Some not very nice things.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking about when I saw this, and then I got to that part, and I was just like, they filled out paperwork for this, right? These organizations had documented by name membership. They took donations. Where did the women get the money from for these donations if they were under their husband's control and they didn't have control over their own property? Like, what do you think would happen? I mean, people were killed in societies where they were oppressed for joining organizations like this, filling out paperwork. These women were completely unafraid to castigate men in a national publication and then ask other women to sign their name to it. So oppressed. Totally. Women had no power and no authority in society, right? No influence.
And when, well, a civil war was fought over slavery. I know it was more complicated than slavery, but and it wasn't just along racial divisions. It was along. I mean, anyone could be a slave, and anyone could be a master of any given genetic demographic, but a civil war was fought over slavery, and similar parameters have been drawn between men and women ever since then, with, I know it's going to blow your minds, feminists, but with men as the analogous, the analog of the slaves. But there's been no hint of a civil war across those lines, even though it's a much bigger deal than the idea of a civil war being fought over black slaves. Even though, again, it wasn't just black slaves, it was Irish slaves and all kinds of slaves. But what's the civil war people are talking about these days? Something about abortion, something about immigration, something about fiscal conservatism. It's been in excess of a century of men being indentured servants of women, and no one's ever even considered having a civil war over that shit, except us space lepers in this throttled corner of the internet.
Well, we're having a culture war over it.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And the sad thing is, it's all of society that's losing. There's not a side that's winning and a side that's losing. It's all of society that's losing. And so that's a situation that I'm not sure how to rectify that, because there are changes that have happened in our society that I don't think you can go back. You can't put the hangover back in a beer mug, right? But maybe if people start figuring out that ethics and morality are actually about healthy living and ways to keep yourself safe and ways to keep yourself from being the asshole in your community, and not just about judging each other. You know, like, women hate them because they use them to judge each other. But and then they get mad when they get used to judge them, right? But when you use them to make your life better and to be the person who makes the lives of the people around you better, and to avoid being the person that makes the lives of the people around you worse, they actually turn out to be pretty good things. And until people figure that out, until we get back to a point where women understand that, I think we're going to end up suffering the way that we are now. We're not going to get into the next thing because it's almost 9 o'clock. So I think we're probably going to... I got one Super Chow. It posted twice, so Richard Beer gave us $5 twice and said, the thing about women doing the same 20 jobs over the years gives me a flashback to when there was a series of vapid women who were posting about their practically do nothing jobs on social media sites while they were practically just in an adult daycare facility for whatever they were contributing to their employers. Yeah, that was... I remember probably the worst or most watched example of that was people posting about what it was like to work at Twitter. And they had, like, free food, and they had a wine bar, and they had all this other stuff like, oh, look how nice it is to work here. Are you going to actually do any work?
No work. We just want the equal pay part. We didn't really mean the equal work part, Hannah.
Yeah. It's funny, when you ask a man about his job or you ask a woman about his job, or about her job, men understand when you ask them about their jobs, you are asking them what they are responsible for at work. And, what they achieve as part of upholding their responsibilities, right? And, yeah, you also want to know if it is a type of work that they're satisfied with, and if there's benefits to taking on those responsibilities and doing that job, and everything. But women a lot of times will talk about how rewarding their job is, or how cushy their job is, or how easy their job is, and think that it's bragging rights, and then they'll complain that they don't get paid enough for it. It's kind of a sad thing. Like, when I talk about my work, it's sort of a mix of those things, right? Because my work, my night job is important to me because the type of service that I'm providing is one that I know not a lot of people feel comfortable doing it. This type of service. And there's a need for it. And I have the skills and capability of filling that need. And so it's a place where I fit, where I can take responsibility for some things that other people don't want to take responsibility for. It's not a high-paying job, but it's not a job that, even if it was worth a lot of money, there's not money to pay for that. So you don't necessarily do it because you want a lot of money. It's not a job you go into for the money. It's a job you go into because you have a sense of responsibility for people in your community who are particularly vulnerable, as a member of your community. And you have the confidence to take on that responsibility. But it is a very rewarding job in that you get to see how upholding your responsibility and doing the tasks related to that job benefits the people that you went there to benefit. So you immediately get to see the direct results of your work the whole time you're doing it. And there's a lot of jobs where you're doing something for months and months and months. Programming is like that, right? You work on something for months and months and months. And a lot of it is figuring out how to tell the computer to do the simplest thing without violating somebody else's proprietary way of telling the computer to do something similar or the same. And it takes months and months and months to get an application created that does what you want it to do, only for it to be full of bugs and people complain about it and people don't appreciate it and people pirate it. Right? But it pays a lot more. And in the end, you do see your project come to fruition. You do get to see the end result. And you go through and you problem solve. And you create something that hopefully you feel satisfied that it filled a need. Right, but it's a different thing. And when I hear from men who are programmers about why they do their jobs and everything, it is that, they take responsibility for creating useful tools for other people. I don't necessarily hear a lot about, oh, I get to do this and I'm rewarded in this way, and sometimes it's I make a lot of money. But a lot of times it's, look at this thing I made, here's what it does, and it allows people to do this, and it's useful in this way, and it's changed this area of work or this area of entertainment and stuff. So men and women are very different in terms of that. And the adult daycare thing really kind of hit home because it's interesting. I've worked in different workplaces with different types of women and everything, and there are a lot of women who treat their jobs that way. Sometimes even when there's a lot of responsibility involved in the job, and they don't do the tasks, they don't do the work, they don't uphold the responsibility, and then they get mad that their coworkers don't pick up their slack. So, in any case, I think that is it. I don't think we have anything else in... Yeah, I don't have anything else in Restream showing any super chats, and I don't have any more Rumble rants. So, I think we're going to call it a night. And then next week, I'll give you a little bit of a preview. Our first thing that we are going to look at is... I'm going to widen this a little bit because it doesn't show the whole thing. If you guys can see this. Whoops. I don't want to open the image in a new tab. Stop that. There we go. Man is a mere imposter, and woman is supreme, says ultra-feminist head. And this is out of London. So you can look forward to that next week. This isn't very long. We've got some other things we'll look at besides it next week. But we will start with that. And with that...
It makes me giggle because I'm picturing just a disembodied head. Women are supreme!
Angry. Like, oh, shoot. I can't think of the Futurama cartoon.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Head in a jar. Feminist head in a jar angrily shouts at men. But yeah, so that's going to be our next week's starting article, and then we will also look at some racist suffragette quotes and do a little discussion about the suffragettes' opposition to the 15th Amendment. But with that, I'll thank everybody for listening to the moderate sausage. Moderately length. Obviously not moderately. We're going to be called extremists for everything we said tonight. And
responsibility.
Yeah.
I thought I'd say it one more time. You drank me into a coma just now. Harry. Well done.
Responsibility. Extremism. Female accountability. Extremist. But yeah. Thanks to my two co-hosts for sticking out the extreme sausage. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Except for WordPress. Fuck you, WordPress, for shutting down on us. Like, can't you just work properly? Good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Men's rights
See you next
activists
Thursday.
are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.